I hugged him, I kissed him, and I said, Hayden, I love you. And they wheeled him away. Whew. I was scared. Honestly, I was scared because that's my baby.
It had been less than 24 hours since Nadine Smith brought her 18-year-old son Hayden to the ER with a headache, fatigue, and a 104-degree temperature. After testing negative for COVID, he was sent home. By the next morning, he had diarrhea and was vomiting. Panicked, Nadine rushed him to Houston Methodist Hospital, where he was taken immediately to the ICU. Overseeing his case was pulmonary specialist Dr. Mir Alakhan.
Our initial suspicion was that there was some type of sepsis or septic shock taking place. He had evidence of pneumonia involving an infection in his lungs. He had signs of liver dysfunction as well as kidney dysfunction that were causing problems, and also his blood pressure was very severely low, so we were concerned about his heart function as well.
As hospital staff ran tests to pinpoint a diagnosis, Nadine went home where she waited and prayed.
I said, God, I trust you. Hayden doesn't belong to me, he belongs to you. I believe that Hayden has a destiny and you've brought him for a purpose and it's not fulfilled as yet. But if you choose to take Hayden, you're still God and I still trust you.
Moments later, a nurse called. It wasn't sepsis or COVID, which Hayden had recovered from a few weeks earlier. In fact, doctors weren't sure what was attacking his body. Hayden's father, Kes, tried to remain hopeful as he spoke with his son on the phone.
They're going to figure out what has happened to you, so just hang in there, just be strong, and hopefully you'll be home in a couple of days. The nurse took the phone from him and was speaking to me, and she said that, Dad, your son is really ill. He does not look good. I was devastated on the inside.
Later that night, they learned just how critical their son was. Hayden's liver, kidneys, lungs, and heart were failing, and the young man had to be put into a medically induced coma and placed on a ventilator.
In someone like Hayden's case, with 4 organ systems deteriorating, the risk of mortality from something like that is in excess of 60%. And sometimes with some of his numbers, you could believe in excess of 80% mortality.
This was not something that I was expecting. I just lost it. As a father, I just started bawling. I just started crying.
Still, Nadine and Kes found the strength to believe God for a miracle.
I start praying, start taking authority. God, you are the only one that can heal him. This is up to you now. It's out of the doctor's hands.
God, make it like it never happened. I want what I've read in the Bible. I said, I want a miracle. I want something supernatural for Hayden.
The only option now was to put Hayden on an advanced life support machine known as ECMO that did the work for Hayden's heart and lungs. Meanwhile, Kes and Nadine's prayers became more fervent, and they weren't alone.
People in London were praying for him. People in Africa was praying for him. My family in Florida was praying for him.
We're not focused on what's happening. We were focused on what God can do.
Then, 2 days later, the impossible. Hayden's lungs, liver, kidneys, and heart started working on their own.
The doctor said, I don't understand this. He said, we took him to get an MRI of his heart, and his heart was perfect. I said, that's Jesus. That's a miracle.
Hayden was soon brought out of his coma and taken off all life support.
It was more than words could express.
I ran in the room and I just hugged him. I was like, Hayden, God is good. You are a miracle.
It was really a surreal experience for me because the way I thought about it is I just as easily could have been another statistic of someone who had died, but instead God gave me this chance to be, a testimony instead.
Hayden made a full recovery in a matter of weeks with no residual effects. Doctors would later conclude that Hayden had likely suffered a cardiac injury brought on by severe inflammation from his previous bout with COVID.
It truly can be considered a miracle because here was a person who came with such an acute and severe illness, which the numbers and all the medical tests and diagnostics would indicate was at a very high chance of dying. And with time and with prayer and with healing, he recovered.
The Smith family has written a book about their journey that shares that Hayden's recovery isn't just a miracle. It's evidence of a God who still cares and still works wonders.
That whole situation had given me a new perspective on both the sovereignty of God and the goodness of God. He'd seen this coming, but he still allowed me to go through it, and he still worked it out for the good.
I honestly believe that my son was saved through prayers. I just thank him for hearing and answering our prayers for our son.
I'm in awe of what God has done. I'm in awe to see this miracle, walking, breathing, running, talking. God still does miracles. God still heals, and prayer still works.